Hello everyone, Sam Wiss here with Life Innovators, and thank you for joining us for part 3 of our index pricing series. In part 1, we went through what an option is, how an options budget is determined by a carrier, and how that options budget translates to the rates offered by a carrier based on the current market price for options. In part 2, we talked through par rates on S&P 500 strategies and how they haven't kept up with cap rates even as interest rates have increased. The simple explanation for that is, although carrier option budgets have increased dramatically as interest rates have increased, so has the cost to hedge uncapped exposure to the S&P 500. As a result, S&P 500 par rates have stayed relatively flat. This raises an interesting question that we're going to tackle today. If par rates for S&P 500 strategies has been flat, then why have par rates gone through the roof in uncapped strategies using non-S&P 500 indices created by banks and asset managers, what we at Life Innovators refer to as engineered indices? The difference, as we'll see here in a second, is in the index itself. Stay tuned. In parts 1 and parts 2 of our index pricing series, we talked about how option prices are dependent on two factors: volatility and interest rates. As volatility and interest rates increase, so does the cost of options. That's why we've seen prices for S&P 500 options spike this year as both volatility and interest rates have increased. Now, what's different about engineered indices is that they control volatility and interest rates within the index itself. Virtually every engineered index in the market uses a volatility control algorithm to continuously balance between high volatility and low volatility assets in order to maintain a specific volatility control target, usually 5%. This locks down the volatility assumption used for pricing options. The vast majority of engineered indices also deduct risk-free interest rates from the returns of the index, which means that only the returns in excess of the risk-free rate are left over. This removes the interest rate from the price of the options. The net result is that the price for options on an engineered index is constant because the index itself is dynamic. If volatility spikes in a particular asset, then the index allocates out of that asset in order to maintain the overall target volatility level for the index. If interest rates increase, then the higher rates will simply be deducted from the returns of the index. This brings us back to the question for this video. Why have participation rates increased so much for engineered indices? The simple answer is because unlike S&P 500 options, the cost of options on engineered indices have stayed constant. As life insurers have increased their option budgets, they can pass that right through to the participation rates on engineered indices. An example in today's world would be at the beginning of 2022, a carrier's option budget might have been around 2%. With participation rate strategies, only one option is involved, so to determine the participation rate for a given index, we can use the formula below. The participation rate equals the options budget divided by the options cost. 2% divided by 3% equals 0.667, or a 67% participation rate at the beginning of 2022. Now, while interest rates have increased, which has increased carrier options budgets, we'll call it 4% now, the option cost has remained the same. The end result is a much higher participation rate, as we can see on the screen. 4% for the options budget divided by the 3% options cost equals 1.33%, or a 133% participation rate. The fact that there are participation rates on engineered indices is certainly a good thing for customers, no doubt about it. But is a higher par rate on an engineered index more valuable than a lower par rate on the S&P 500? Not necessarily. Most engineered indices are currently allocated heavily to low-risk assets like cash. You might have a 133% par rate, but on an engineered index that is, to use a real example, currently 50% allocated to bonds and 50% allocated to cash. A client might be better off just taking a 35% par rate on the S&P 500 itself. Ultimately, that's up to the producer and the client to decide. Thanks for watching.